Okay, hello everybody. Today I am here with Kaka Ray, the founder of Tennesse Neurofeedback out of Nashville, Tennessee. She is a trauma therapist, a pioneer in neurofeedback, and an all-around incredible person. Thank you for
Oh,
joining us, Kate.
I am so glad to be here. I love this. I love you and I love doing podcasts. So
Oh, I
I'm
love
thrilled.
you. K- KK, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, grew up on a little farm, and then went to the University of Arkansas for undergrad.
And what was your sort of cultural upbringing? Like, what was it like growing up?
That's a great question. I would say my parents were both at least second. So on my mom's side, third generation educated. We grew up in a little rural community that was probably much less college oriented than my family was. And it was a wonderful experience. It was diverse, racially diverse, socioeconomically diverse, and I loved my school. Yeah, and I don't really talk about my parents much yet. They're both still
Mhm.
living, and so I don't go into a lot of family history.
Okay. And it sounds though like education was a strong value.
It was a very strong value, and I'm very thankful for that. It wasn't even optional. Education was just what you did. So I'm really thankful for that.
How did that look for you when you were growing up? Did you love to read? Were you into science or math?
You got some good questions. This is not about neurofeedback, but I'll go on. I love science and math. School came pretty easy. I know I didn't apply myself until I got to graduate school. So I've loved watching my children really embrace education early on. I tended to skate by, but when I got to graduate school, I dug in. I was already an adult and had children, so I took it really seriously. Yeah, that's when I would say learning was really the funnest for me, was learning about how the brain worked, therapy, those kind of things.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this because I'm thinking you strike me as such a curious person. And it makes sense that that would have fed off into your children. But how do you think you wound up where you are? What made you decide
That's a
therapy and
great,
neurofeedback?
yeah, another great question. So there was a time when, and your generation doesn't remember this, but we had phone bills and they got billed for the amount of time you were on long distance. And so that dates me for sure. But we would get these, David and I moved around a lot with his job, and we would get these massive phone bills. And he'd come home from work and I'd be like, so and so's in crisis, or this
Mm.
drama's happened today with so and so, or whatever. And about that time, it was post my second child, I really battled with postpartum depression.
Mm.
And he said to me, how come all your friends are in crisis and you're the one on Prozac? And so Prozac was new then too. And so it was really a gift that he gave me. I thought about that question a lot. Therapists were really coming more mainstream. It wasn't an out of the box thing to get therapy, where now there's not a stigma. There's places in the country that it's still a stigma, but that's really not universal anymore. And so there came a time where I needed to go to therapy and really began to see that I had the the mindset for curiosity and helping people see solutions and all that. So when my daughter got to kindergarten, I went back to graduate school for marriage and family therapy. So that's how I launched into that, just having an affinity for people in crisis and people wanting to figure out things. And I love that. And so it was very natural, where if you had told me I needed to go be an administrator or an accountant, that would never have come natural to me. So
Mhm.
I don't even know if I could have done it, honestly. There's a little bit of an art to it, a
Mm.
creative side, or kind of a hardwiring that you either get it or not. And I do think I have that. I think my daughter Kelsey has that too. There's something where there's a curiosity and a compassion that intersects for people.
I can totally see that. It's like wizardry.
I love it. It can be. There is a little bit of a sixth sense to it, and I hope that doesn't sound egotistical, but I've had people jump off the couch and say, "What's wrong with you?" Because I can smell alcohol when it's not there and think there's a drinking problem, or I don't know, somebody's dating someone without them telling me. I mean, yeah, I perceive there's some weird sixth sense there.
Oh, I believe that 100%.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun when it happens.
Okay, so to help people place in time, Kelsey is your daughter, David is your husband. They've both come up a little bit. And it sounds like around how old were you when you decided you were like, oh, this is it? Finally, it clicked for you that you were like, this is what I'm
Yeah,
going to wind up doing.
I think I've done therapy. This will date me, but I'm past 25 years. So I think I was young to mid 30s when I went back to graduate school. Something
That's
like
so
that.
cool. And also so expansive, I think, for people who feel like they have to have it all figured out by
Yeah,
25.
and for therapy, I always say you can't take people further than you've been yourself. Some people might argue that, but I didn't like to see children, adolescents that were ahead of where I was in the life cycle stage, and now I'm a grandparent, so I don't mind seeing people with grandparent issues now, but before that I wouldn't. So I think you have to live some life to be able to draw on experientially what, you help people in the room with.
To sort of have walked where they have walked to an
I think
extent.
so. I think we would probably have a huge therapy shortage if we required that. I think there's some fantastic therapists that do child and adolescent work that haven't had their own children. But I
Mhm,
think it's worth noting if that's something that is
mhm,
their wheelhouse, if that makes sense.
mhm.
And what experiences they draw on besides just textbook and white paper studies.
That's an amazing point to make for people who are considering maybe how to choose a therapist, of perhaps asking how it is that you relate, whether it's through some particular training or a certain perspective, or through having some lived experience around the context.
Yes. And I want to be careful as I say this, but someone that's able also to move in and out of people's worldviews. That's not to say you don't have your own worldview, but a lot of damage can be done on that spectrum if, you call yourself a certain kind of therapist and don't have the ability to move in and out of it's kind of like an interior designer shouldn't have just one way they decorate a room because their style isn't going to be what everybody likes. So you have to be
Mhm.
really careful on the models you use and the worldview that you adopt to not have it rigid. Does that make sense? The
I would love
rigidity
to
is,
even hear maybe a little more on that because I think you're tapping
yeah.
into
So
something really
So
interesting.
in the South, we have what I would call a lot of Christianese, which is a
Mm.
view. I would say it's a cultural worldview that has a lot of dogmatic spin to it. And so if you hold that dogma and things have grown and become more open, or people's views have, which is wonderful. But, 20 years ago, I found myself having to defend women on why they would get a divorce in the church, like, do you have grounds or whatever? And I think a couple of things people need to stay in their own lane. A heart surgeon doesn't need to be doing therapy, or a pastor doesn't need to be doing crisis counseling, those kind of things. So you have to be really careful. And that's a maturity issue too. And one of the things, and it's much bigger than just choosing a therapist, but a sign of health is our ability to be flexible. Of course, there are some non-negotiables for anybody, but we have to be careful if those are rigid positions that we take, if we're dealing with people that can get very abusive very quickly.
That makes a lot of sense. Are you kind of saying if someone has a worldview that they can't step outside of?
Exactly. Exactly. As a therapist, you should have an ethical mandate to disclose that and not take that client.
That 100%. If you have it and you can't step outside of it, fine, but disclose that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because in kind
And
of trying to see the person that you are not going to be able to put your view down for them, you could do a
yeah,
lot of damage in their healing journey.
because a therapist, a boss, a pastor, a parent, a physician, all of that, there's what we call power imbalances that are innate in
Mhm.
that dynamic. And so you really, really have to be mindful. And I get a lot of people in my office that their trauma is around power imbalances. It typically is a power imbalance that somebody has taken advantage of. And so we don't want to send somebody to uh, an organization, religious, non-religious, that have power imbalances that could exploit that already injured person. And we see that a lot. Does that make sense?
So much that's coming up right now in the world, right? Like
Yes.
politically, between
Yes.
like all the debate around masculinity, femininity, and
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so much everywhere you turn, and that's where I've spent most of my time in the last year, is really paying attention to narcissistic abuse recovery. And we've always studied narcissism and narcissistic tendencies and all that, but Dr. Ramani is massive in this. If you have a narcissistic, any kind of injuries there, she's excellent. She's got a book called It's Not You, and I highly recommend that to anybody.
driving home that idea of power dynamics and with
Yes.
your therapist.
Yes, and
Because
so you
there's
wanna
going
be
to be a power dynamic there, right?
there is a power dynamic, and that's what you have to be really, really careful for and not exploit. You know,
Yeah.
there is power imbalance innately, and so it's not that you make sure it goes away, it's that you don't exploit that person, because
That's
it's much easier to exploit people when there is a power imbalance. Think about this, your boss pays your paycheck, and that behavior affects your bottom of your hierarchy of need, food, shelter,
mhm,
clothing, and that person has so much power to keep that base of the hierarchy of needs stable or destabilize it.
mhm.
And so in that, you want to be careful of a few things. One, that you don't exploit, but also you have to really watch for dual relationships. Like, as a boss, are you going to be friends with this person? Because that's very confusing. And
Mhm.
mostly you talk about it. In my world, it's against the law and against ethics to do anything that could be more exploitative than what you do in the actual therapy context.
Mm.
Does that make sense what I'm
This is
saying?
totally making sense, and I think just to hold that idea of we can't not have power dynamics, right? We're always gonna have them,
Right.
but the idea here is really how do we not exploit them?
The flip side of that too, though, is that someone that has been in an exploited situation, I don't know if that's the right word, but they're coming out of something, their brain is much more um, comfortable going to what
Mm,
I would call a one down position. So
mm,
if you think of a power dynamic being a one up, one down, and if the power dynamic becomes rigid or is rigid by design and somebody's been exploited, they're much more comfortable, their brain, to go and just sit in the one down chair. And so
mhm,
a lot of the healing work goes with finding the grown ass woman or grown ass man and saying, I don't have to just go in this relationship and be in a one down place. And or it's a fluid dynamic, especially interpersonal relationships, not necessarily design power imbalance like work or church or whatever. When you're in a partnership, you want to make sure that you don't just automatically go to this one down position all the time, because that could get very damaging for you and confusing for the person that's maybe not an exploiter, and they get thrust in that. So the work is to do this one down on yourself if that's where you usually are, if that
and
makes
I
sense.
can see how with a therapist, it's so important to have that dynamic be healthy because the therapist needs to help you be able to stop one downing yourself.
Exactly.
And if they are
Exactly.
going to discreetly be one downing you, how that would be a huge
Right.
problem.
Right. And also very difficult to recognize for the client. for the patient.
100%. I wonder if you can speak to this at all for people who feel if they can recognize it or not, but have had traumatic therapy experiences, because
Absolutely.
how
Yeah,
do you recover from that? How do you become someone who doesn't sit and say, I don't ever want to go to therapy. I can't trust a therapist?
well, that's a great question, and unfortunately, that happens. And that's a good alternative. Neurofeedback becomes a very good alternative there because it can calm you down neurologically without even having to talk. And so
Mm.
so that's that's a good reason to go to that. Also to go to maybe something like a 12-step adult children of alcoholics, AA, Al-Anon, say all of those are peer to peer. And so there's in theory not a power imbalance at those, which is a good place to have some healing without the power dynamic.
Perhaps try a different modality where you could also maybe
Exactly.
get some healing, and then maybe you could try again if you
And do your research on who you're going to see. So that's the hard part.
do you have any tips perhaps on how someone might know that they're going to a establishment or a provider that is
Yeah, and
quality
that's where
provider?
it gets really complicated because you've got the insurance piece and you've got
Mhm.
providers that don't accept insurance anymore because the reimbursement's so bad, and you tend to see the more talented therapists unwilling to file insurance where you could file your own. It's really time consuming. It's just a mess. But by and large, I think your best bet is to go with referrals of people you know and trust that have had good experiences. Word of mouth is, I really think, is your best bet.
That's how I found any good therapist I've ever seen, you included.
Yeah, you're sweet. You're sweet. But it's kind of like going on a date, a blind date versus just not knowing anybody that knows that person versus somebody saying, oh, the two of y'all could be a fit. That's
Totally.
not to say that Hinge doesn't work sometimes. I just think there's a lot more to it. If you know, it's helpful if there's more intersections.
Well, that's statistically one of the top ways people meet their partners, right? Is by setups.
And that's the best way. I mean, and I think that's the same idea with therapy. Now, neurofeedback is a little bit that way because there's different providers that have different levels of training and certifications and experience. And so you want to do your due diligence on that, but you don't necessarily need to know somebody that has done it at that clinic.
Well, that brings us to the moment we've all been waiting for. Tell us, what is neurofeedback?
Okay, so the way I'll explain it is think of different buckets for mental health treatment. Think of medicine as one, talk therapy as one, deep trauma talk therapy, that would be brain spotting and EMDR. Think of 12-step slash group therapy, and then I'll put the bucket of neurofeedback separately from all of those. Those are all different modalities, and you can even put yoga in there or exercise or diet. There's a whole lot of buckets that can affect our mental health or improve it. And so we're just talking about the bucket of neurofeedback, and what it is we have the ability to do the EEG of the brain. And so that's called a brain map. And what we do is it's normed to a database. So I map your brain, Sky, and we get the report back and it says your brain is depressed or your brain is anxious or you have a trauma response or you have, depletion sitting in the back of your brain that shows us trauma for a lifespan through developmental. So we can tell that. The anxious brain, we can tell what type of anxiety you're having. Is it rumination? Is it afraid of the future? Kind of whatever the type of anxiety is. And then also one huge one is ADD. We can tell, and this is a soapbox I'm on a lot, is do you truly have ADD, which means the brain slows down when you're trying to learn?
Mm.
Or do you have inattentive anxiety where your brain is just chattery and you can't calm down enough to focus. And the reason it's a soapbox for me on that is we are really quick to give stimulants to somebody that has what is perceived in the classroom or the workforce or even relationally as ADD. And if it's truly inattentive anxiety, we're putting a stimulant on top of an already anxious brain. So everybody can get more done when they have a stimulant in their body. Not everybody, but most people. And so what we don't want is a child that gets medicated for anxiety with a stimulant. Because what happens then is the minute that they get their first puff of weed or their first beer, all of a sudden everything calms down and they're off to the races as a gateway of keeping that brain calm. Where with neurofeedback, we'll find out what it is and we begin to treat. So you get the QEEG, the brain map, and then that informs us how we're going to train your brain. Think of like physical therapy or going to work out, Pilates, things you do, that repetitive training gets that muscle stronger. So with neurofeedback, you sit in front of a screen and we place electrodes. There's nothing going into your brain, only measurement. And you're looking at a screen, and when your brain begins to go to the direction we want it to, the screen brightens. And so at a non-conscious level, your brain learns to repeat that behavior. So that's the muscle memory or the new neuro pathways that we're developing. And so over time, those get stronger. And what you feel about 12 training sessions in, you begin to go, oh, I slept better last night. Or, oh, that trigger didn't affect me like it used to, or whatever. I'm not as anxious about standing up in front of people, whatever that is. And then we usually say 40 sessions gets us to really hold that change. Many times people with a lot of trauma in their history need to do a lot more. We see that with kids of adoption or foster care, because they've had so much complex trauma that it takes more sessions. But for the typical person, you get to 40 sessions and the brain has changed. With medicine, you're masking, you're treating symptoms. With neurofeedback, you're actually changing the brain to a more healthy, regulated state. Does that all make sense? The whole idea is that we take a dysregulated brain, the wave patterns, and we move them to a much more regulated state so that the brain is behaving in situations appropriately.
That makes sense. And what I'm hearing too is so much about the repetition, right? So that you can build those new neural pathways because things are so set.
It's not a quick fix to grow muscles, that with Pilates, you probably don't see true muscle change for a few sessions, right?
Totally.
And then if you don't do it over time, your muscles regress. The brain doesn't. The brain wants to stay in a regulated state, so it heals itself and stays in that regulated state unless you get a head injury or you're in another massive crisis or whatever. Where we recommend more ongoing is people that are in high stress situations. It kind of just keeps the basement from falling lower. So you would do 2 to 3 trainings a week to maybe 1 or 2 a month if you're staying in a high stress job or personal situation.
It sounds like something that really everyone could benefit from.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And people typically say, oh, I'm scared what my brain's going to show when they do a brain map. But the truth is it becomes much more objective. Just like if you have high blood pressure and you measure it, then you're like, oh, and I take a medicine and it helps. And so it's not like a character issue that your brain's firing off too much or that your sleep is disturbed or that you've got this massive trigger that when you come around somebody, you just want to bite their head off. I mean, it's all brain-based. And so if you can shift from it being character and behavioral deficit kind of stuff, it really becomes so much better to treat. and for the person to embrace, and that's what the brain map shows. So you do the brain map, and we have trained neurotherapists that are able to look at that brain map and go over it with you and show you. And many times what we hear is, oh my gosh, how did you know that? And it's just because the brain is showing us that.
That's what my experience was like, and I find it to be empowering because it's not
Exactly.
about you or
Right.
something that you're doing. It's your brain could use a little support.
Right. Right. And your brain loves to heal itself. So it just loves to repeat the regulated state, and
Mhm.
then gives you new coping abilities a lot of times.
So again, it sounds like something that would be great for everyone. Is there any particular areas that you really love to see like this? It sounds like one is ADD, but are there
Yeah,
other?
the big thing is we're in crisis of anxiety. Very seldom do you find anybody in the US that has not either had it themselves or doesn't have a family member or friend that's having panic attacks. I mean, our culture is so polarized right now, and everything we're bombarded with the media. The media makes their money on sensational, scary things. Social media is killing our kids, you know, and the comparison, all that, the brain is just on fire. And so what happens after anxiety goes on for a long enough time, then your brain just says, I can't do it anymore, and shuts down, and all of a sudden you're depressed. And the depression is how your brain responds to depletion. And so you can't get out of bed. I would say the thing that is huge is anxiety, and get their brain calmed down enough so they can continue to function without having all the ancillary things that happen with an anxious brain.
That makes so much sense. And I can say from my own experience of, I think I'm like close to 30 sessions now. A big thing for me is seeing, oh, this can help break the cycle so that you can
That's it.
take more action to feel healthier, get better.
Yes.
Because some things I had a hard time moving the needle on. Like I just
Yeah.
couldn't get myself together. And with social media too, it's like you go on the phone for like a hit of dopamine
Oh, yeah. Oh,
stimulation.
yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
do feel like it's helped a little bit to be like, "Oh, I'm doing that," to,
It'd
like,
feel
see the
good.
pattern. What's something that
That's
might
right.
feel better and give me some energy and some support to be able to go toward that?
That's what I see a lot, and it feeds on itself because the brain gets a reward from feeling a sense of accomplishment or not doing an old behavior that wasn't serving it well. The thing that was funniest in my marriage is that David and I, we've been married 35 years now, and we would have the same fight over and over and over again for 30 years, well, 25. And we both did neurofeedback, and it would get to where now we would see ourselves going down that interaction, that systemic whatever, and we would either just laugh or just go, not important enough to die on this hill. So that same dynamic that we had reinforced for years and years just went away. And that's one thing that's so wonderful with neurofeedback. If the partners or the families get treated, then the whole system begins to get healthy. And that's exponential. It feeds on itself.
This is incredible, and this is totally making sense now because we have these patterns in our brain, and they wanna keep going. But if you can do something like this that can help you to be like, "Oh, you always go this way, but maybe now you could go that way."
That's right. Exactly. And that's exactly what happens is because you have literally those old neural pathways weaken. Think of when you build a road, first you have to cut the forest down, and then you have a dirt road, and then you pave the road, and then pretty soon it's just easy, like the Audubon. You can go 120 miles an hour. And that's what neural pathways do. So if you quit using them, they start to grow weeds and grass and trees, and that's not somewhere you go anymore, which is wonderful. And the sense of accomplishment of a kid that would say, well, used to I would have hit my brother for that, and he doesn't hit anymore. He could not stop the impulsiveness of it. And with neurofeedback, he does. And it's just a wonderful feeling for that kid. And then he'll repeat that behavior again because he gets the dopamine hit from the positive coping mechanism.
I see now too what you mean about how it continues working after you stop doing it.
Gets even improves. We will see the brain map. We map you. You do 20 sessions, and then ideally we'll map you again so that we can see quantitatively the improvement. And that'll match up with how you self-report on what's better. But then, somebody will do 20 more, we'll map them, and then they may wait 6 months to come in. And if we mapped them again, their brain has continued to improve. And that's what you're seeing is that reinforcement of good behavior.
Wow. Well, two things that are coming up for me here are one, it sounds like this is just a great starting place potentially. You could add it in at any point on your healing journey, but if things feel so overwhelming and
Yes.
you're not sure of where to start.
Particularly with adolescents and young adults, they just want to feel better. They don't necessarily want to go through, it may take people to their mid-30s, even later, to begin to really delve into family of origin issues that of why you are who you are. But you're dysregulated in this somewhat sick family system or a really sick family system, and you just don't want to talk about it. And that's where neurofeedback is a huge tool to use because you get an adolescent boy that you're dragging in anyway, and then they know they can come in and watch Netflix and feel better. It's such a great alternative.
Yeah.
And then their brain gets settled down enough. Many times we see this a lot. Then you can start talking about it.
And not feel less overwhelming.
Exactly. One thing I haven't talked about, Sky, is why I brought neurofeedback in. I had trained with David Grand, who's in Manhattan. He developed brain spotting. Don't get that confused with the bucket of neurofeedback, but brain spotting is in the bucket with EMDR and deep somatic type talk therapy. And I trained with him and started seeing people really get better with a deeper therapy than just talking. Talking is the prefrontal cortex, and trauma is held in the very deep, non-conscious part of the mammalian reptilian brain. So we can talk about trauma until the cows come home, but that won't change or release this. And so when I started doing brain spotting, I realized that we could release this stuff so that people don't have the triggers, which are implicit memories from being in the hypervigilant state. And that's probably a whole nother podcast that we could talk about. But I went and trained with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he was talking about combining those two buckets of EMDR, brain spotting, with neurofeedback. And he would say the combination of those you can get to curative. And so after that training, I bought a machine and put David on the couch as the guinea pig. And so it worked for us. And that's why I moved into the neurofeedback world, because I was doing brain spotting and I needed more. So getting those trauma memories processed from first person present tense, which is the hypervigilant state, to third person past tense, and also the neurofeedback calming everything down neurologically, then the brain had. And the healing I've seen with people with that combination is just remarkable. So many people that are already doing trauma work, they add that, their recovery goes so much faster and so much deeper. So the regression isn't there. Is huge. And also people that have been extremely traumatized that might not be able to even sit in a therapist's office and talk about it. They dissociate or whatever. Starting with neurofeedback is also a really good thing. So a lot of times I'll have clients come in, we'll do a brain map, and I'll say, or Kelsey, my daughter that runs the clinic, will say, your brain's on fire. It's talking about your trauma or working on your trauma is not going to work yet. It's too dysregulated. And so doing neurofeedback for, 20 sessions calms everything down, and then you can get in there and get the trauma going. Sometimes you do it in tandem. I like that a lot if the client's able to.
Oh, this makes so much sense too, because as we were just talking about, like the repetition you need sometimes. And say
Yes,
you're going into therapy once a week and you really are working with some stuff that having that repeated experience in the neurofeedback can really
of
get your
common
brain.
things. Yes, it does. It's miraculous. And so, we do intensives where people that aren't in our area will come in and we'll do both neurofeedback and put them with excellent expert level therapists, and they can do work, and I highly recommend that combo as opposed to going inpatient or an intensive outpatient, because you get the one-on-one and you get the brain change. That's not to say you don't do that afterwards, or even maybe you've already done that, but where the brain really changes is a week of if you've got a week to do both the trauma therapy with the neurofeedback in an intensive way.
Intensive, I think, is such a cool setup too, because sometimes I think it's intimidating to people, the idea of having to change their life to put all of this in an ongoing basis. And sometimes it's more accessible to be like, I'm going to go for a week. And then
Exactly.
if you can
Yeah.
make a lot of change in that and then feel possibly more open to whatever
That,
next.
and if they're available, we have home units that the intensive person can take home with them and continue the neurofeedback. And many times they stick with the therapist they've done with the intensive. And so you keep the work going with the neurofeedback if you don't live in this area.
Yes. And to elaborate on the home unit, when I first heard about this, I was like, how does that work? But it's really almost the same as when you're in the clinic, but you're taking the machine home and you get all the education about how to set it up. And then it
Right.
allows you, if you're not in Tennessee, to be able to keep doing the work and kind of schedule a little bit. We'll model too, because me and Ross have the home unit right now and we're able to sort of do it together. Not
Right.
at the
Because you can.
same time, but having two people in the same house, and particularly people who live together and are on a healing journey together because
It's
they
and that then you get the systemic exponential benefit from both doing.
say if you're living with your partner or if you're living with your child and you both are wanting to do that sort of thing, that's a really cool option
Yes.
to have.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if someone wanted to dive into this, tell us about kind of getting set up at Tennessee Neurofeedback, how that goes.
Well, we will roll out the red carpet for somebody that's going to put the effort in coming down here. If you want to have a therapist when you come, we will work that out too. And then you come, you stay in a hotel very close to our office, and you'll do a couple of sessions of neurofeedback every day and work with a therapist, probably anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day, and sometimes more than one therapist. We might do, if a couple comes, we might have a couple therapists and an individual therapist, or we might have two trauma therapists working, or if the addiction is in play, we might pull in an addiction specialist, something like that. So we really tailor it to what your story is, what you need. We'll listen to that and really figure that out. And then you come in for a week and do it, and we'll map you when you get here, and then we map you when you leave so you can see how much change you've made in a week. And then hopefully take it home, do 20 more sessions, and then come back and map one last time.
So is that usually what you recommend? How do you recommend people measure their progress and what they need?
That's a good question. We have what we call progress trackers, and that's self-report. So we know when you come in, if your anxiety's a 9 out of 10, and then you're reporting 20 sessions in, it's at a 2. You know, you might still say you're anxious because our brain doesn't really remember how bad things felt more than like a week ago, but we're able to say subjectively from your report, this is how it's gotten better. Then we have the remap, so we're able to see objectively what's changed. And typically, our neurotherapist will say, it's a good time to stop. you've got great progress. We don't want to be the Hotel California that you never can get out of. We
Mhm.
want to get you treated and get you relief and move you on. The more trauma you've had, the more sessions you're going to need. And that's just, unfortunately, trauma damages the brain. And so it takes it a while to get back online. So it's really, each person's different. Averages wise, just unless you've had massive, massive amounts of trauma, 40 sessions and you're going to be on your way, 40 to 60.
Mhm. Okay. 40 to 60 sessions, and you're kind of measuring, self-reporting, and then doing the map and checking back in. Mm. Is there ever a case where you kinda change protocol midway?
Yeah. Yeah. We monitor. If you're not in the office, we still monitor. So we're monitoring and you're self-reporting. I think it's every 5 sessions. And so let's say all of a sudden you're saying we're doing a protocol that helps your sleep, because that's the one thing we want to go after really quickly is get your sleep online, because that's when your brain detoxes and you get so much better, so much faster if you're sleeping. And sleep goes hand in hand with an anxious brain. So we want to get that calmed down. And then all of a sudden you're sleeping. So then we're going to look at that and we're going to go, okay, your next thing that you reported the most discomfort with is your, let's say rumination at work. And so then we're going to change the placements or the location and start training that. And so it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube too. One place gets put in, that's going to affect and help other things that are happening, because the brain wants to move to a more regulated state. So
Mhm.
yes, we will change the placements if they need to be. And
Like,
once the brain calms down a lot and you've got a lot of trauma, then we're going to start really working in the back of the brain where that trauma is and kind of start opening that up. And that's when it's good to be working with a therapist, because memories start to come up and things, your brain's like, "Oh, I can handle looking at that and process it now," where before
mhm.
it might have been compartmentalized down, shut down to not want to look at that stuff.
Okay, and I know that you guys also work with people who are looking for peak performance, and
Absolutely.
for the wellness junkies, could this be something you do indefinitely? What if people wanna do more?
Yes, yeah. We're in Music City, so we have peak performing musicians, athletes, executives that like to have that edge to get to the flow. By and large, when you get a brain of somebody that has elite type behaviors, their brain is depleted. It's not like they have this magnificent brain. They just have the ability to squeeze it out like a sponge. And so we want to power that brain up. That's going to help their performance anyway. And then we go into a performance protocol where it teaches them how to be in flow and what that feels like and get there quicker. And that's really cool.
And would someone like that come in, say, would they come in once a year and do a tune-up? Or it can look all sorts of different ways.
There's different ways. I would say you'd want to do the first 40, just like anybody's brain does, and get that all regulated and then start to see, okay, and it may be something that is worth keeping a machine for 6 months. And we have
Mhm.
affordable packages, plans, whatever for that, so that you can come in once a week or have the machine and do, a session a week. I have a PGA golfer, so before the tournament, we're going to up the number of sessions we're doing to get into that flow state more quickly.
Mhm.
Or a big concert coming up. We're gonna get into flow and exercise that part of the brain.
That is so cool. This is making me think I have been getting ads for, like, neurofeedback machines on Instagram. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit
I
about
would say be real careful on spending your money on something you can buy on Instagram for that.
anything you
You're
could buy on Instagram for anything?
Yeah, but for sure on the mental health gadgetry stuff, by and large, you're much better off just downloading Headspace and doing meditation. Space or really any of the meditation apps, just meditate, because that calms the brain down and really you're not getting a whole lot more on most of those gadgets. I'm probably going to get bad letters for saying that, but you know, there are certification and protocols and expertise. We're all licensed, that stuff for a reason. That's the way I feel about it, but I'm in the camp of like, let's be best in practice. And that's what we are at Tennessee Neurofeedback.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that health is such an investment and investments compound.
That's right. That's exactly right. And if you're invested, you're going to do it. You know, it's kind of back to that treadmill thing. If you can buy something for $250 off the internet, you're probably not going to take it real seriously.
Totally. And you guys have, as you said, payment plans to make things
Oh,
accessible
good.
to a
I'm so
lot of
glad you
different
said that.
levels.
We do. And at Tennessee Neurofeedback, we give a lot of our care away. We have a sliding scale that we use, and we take that very seriously doing pro bono work. We work with kids without families here in town.
Mhm.
There's some organizations that house unfamilied. I don't know exactly how to say that without sounding um, callous, but we do a lot of pro bono work, and we're really proud of that. But also have a sliding scale, and we have a payment plan that's non-interest, and so we have a lot of points of entry that you can get
And
help
I
with.
think all of this is to say there can be a lot of, I think, like disillusionment around getting good health care these days.
Absolutely.
And to not be discouraged from seeking out the best care that you can for yourself. And a lot of that
Yeah.
to research and
Knowing it's there and knowing the right places to go. It can be overwhelming to advocate for your own health care, but you still have to be in charge of your own health.
which can be overwhelming. But the thing that has excited me about neurofeedback is that
Oh, do it.
I think
Yes.
it makes things easier, like this, like being an advocate for your own healthcare and just dealing with the overwhelm that can come with life and living in a time when we have just information deluge all the time.
Absolutely.
Giving your brain a softer place to land and to
That's
feel
it.
more supported, that you can go out and seek the best life for yourself and feel empowered
It
to do
does.
that.
Yes, it powers your brain back up. Think of a battery power and living there's so much bombardment. There is here in Nashville too, same thing. I mean, you're getting input at every single second your eyes are open, and that drains the battery power of your brain. Think of it as battery. And what we're doing is powering that back up into a regulated state so that you can do things. It's not that you get smarter, it's that you are more efficient. Your brain, if you've got memory issues, many times it's because your brain is drained and it's taken away the energy that it uses up here to just do the basic things that a human needs, like breathing and heart rate and stuff. So as we power that back up, the efficiency becomes so much better and you can get shit done.
And be aware, I think, right, of what it is that you want to do, what you want to put your
Exactly.
energy toward.
Yeah, and you're not swimming through mud anymore so that you're just basically surviving through the day. You know, we want more than that for life.
Yeah. And that's what we all want, which honestly is what this podcast is kind of about, like ending up in the places where feel really right and aligned for us individually. Which brings
Yes.
me to few more questions for you. You strike me, KK, as someone who has a lot of love for people and a lot of curiosity and is living life in a really engaged way. And I find
That's
that
so sweet to say. I love that.
I
I
find
want to
that
be
to be
that
very
person.
inspiring. You are that person. You totally are that person. And seeking that out, I'm so myself, and I think a lot of other people, hungry to hear from people who have walked these paths a little bit and have some
Yeah.
experience and might be able to share a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how have you felt into what are the right paths for you to take in life? I know it's a broad question, but
Well, I think that we have an organization here called Thistle Farms, and their brand is Love Heals.
Mm.
You know, I found that to be so true in my life and in my work, in my family. And if I can be about that, the reward is mine. I get a little healing from that myself, but I don't know what we're supposed to be about if we're not about, loving humanity, and of course my worldview does inform that. And I've learned so much from my kids about that and staying open. I think we have to. There's a past governor of Tennessee that in his Bill Haslam in his autobiography, he says, I look at all the situations I find myself in and say, what if I'm wrong? And to
Mm.
be open to other opinions, other perspectives. I've got a professor that said there's no pancake so thin there's not two sides to it. And I think that where we are now culturally is we've got to be about that, or none of us can sustain this. It's so painful. And so I think I've had amazing friends along the way. I'm married to an amazing man that has celebrated me doing this work. And I have two amazing kids and their spouses now that celebrate, make fun of the work, make fun of me in the work, and keep me nimble in it, and they believe in health and moving us all towards health. And so at this stage in life, I just don't know anything more important than being interested in other human beings and what their stories are. I mean, just today, I've had to integrate being with a dear friend who's scared of being picked up by ICE
Mm.
and the horror that she's living in, and another dear friend that is battling with horrific things and has every economic advantage that anyone could want. And integrating that within myself is work, and being able to love both of those people is work, but it's very rewarding to hold both of those and still be okay. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, I'm picking up on here. It sounds like the things and the people you've decided to take on in your life, there's a sense of it's rewarding.
So rewarding, so fun. I'm working now with a collegiate volleyball team, and it is the funnest work I've ever done in my life, working with these college kids, and I'm donating my time. And I'll tell you, I would do it all the time if I could. I love it. And so I think it's finding things that human in nature and just going for it. It's so fun. Such fun work.
So it sounds like things you've been guided by are it's fun. It feels good, would you say?
Oh, I love the buzz. I love the buzz of this work. It's fun. I love figuring out the puzzle. I love people getting better and turning around and saying they got better. Kelsey and I talked about that the other day. That's why we get up, is because the work is so rewarding to see people get healthy.
And has it always felt good when you started down this journey of thinking, I'm going to become a therapist, and then finding I'm going to build on that by specializing in trauma and neurofeedback? Was there ever a time where you doubted it, or did it always feel?
I think a couple of things on that. I'm very, very grateful that I have never not wanted to do this job. I can't even figure out a way that I would stop doing it, or would want to stop doing it. But there were times that my motivation was not always one pathway. There were times that I had to have a certain amount of income, and the work was hard.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that, I bounced out of bed every morning thinking, oh, I can't wait to go see 8 people in a day. So this is more for therapists. I'm not saying that it has to be, as fun as it is for me now. And it wasn't always fun. It was always rewarding, and I never wanted to stop. But life pressures are there too. Nobody's going to like their job 100% of the time. That's a false narrative that you shouldn't avail yourself to. And if you're hearing that with me, don't measure your satisfaction right now. But I would say dealing with people's lives in a therapeutic setting is sacred. And if you don't see it as sacred, as somebody's story is sacred, you might not be in the right business. When somebody gets their nerve up to walk in my office and tell me the things that they have to tell me to get the help they need, they deserve nothing but respect and honor. And it is a privilege to get to be part of that.
That's really beautiful, KK.
Oh, thank
you. And as you led up to that, before you found this career, what did that look like?
Well, I started out as a teacher right out of school. I taught science in rural Arkansas, and I loved it. I loved the kids. I don't think I was a great science teacher, but I did love the relationships I had with the kids. So I knew that I wanted to either teach or something. And but then I had children, and I stayed home with them, and that was probably the hardest job I've ever had. And I think one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. I'm so thankful I was able to do that. But man, I couldn't have done that once they got to school. I had to be busier. And so that's when therapy just happened to cross my path. And that was awesome.
And it sounds like you really liked being a teacher too. I wonder, how much of life do you think is choosing to love what you're doing versus winding up in the right spot?
I don't know. I mean, I had jobs before I taught school that I hated. And I will tell you, Tennesse Neurofeedback, that was really crazy how Bessel van der Kolk's training led me to that. But I am not a businesswoman. I did not enjoy running that company. And Kelsey has the gift for that and so much better at it than I am. I think being able to say I'm not good at something is so freeing, or I don't like something. Typically, you don't like what you can't do anyway. So, and don't hear that as hopeless if you're in a job that you can't stand. Just start working towards getting out of it, moving towards something that you can stand, because you're spending most of your life doing that job. So, but I think when you find what you're good at and find what you love and they're the same thing, then it's a gift.
Something I'm hearing from that is maybe striving to be able to walk away from things or find ways to walk away from things that you're like, I just don't like this. I don't want to do it. I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
Versus rather, that's different from I like this thing, but it's hard right now.
Right. Totally different. Totally
There's
different.
a difference between that.
And, your age group is in a whole different place than mine is, because things are so expensive. Cost of living is so much higher. Real estate is so much higher. There are demands financially that have requirements for many that they have to do things they don't like to keep that base of the hierarchy of needs stable. And so it's a bind to afford life many times. And so you have to integrate all that too.
And that brings me to also the ways that we find satisfaction and joy outside of work. As someone who's been married for 35 years, very impressive.
Yeah.
How
I
did
hope
you
David's
do that?
not listening and he says it. It might be, how do we do it?
You do that.
Well, we worked hard. We worked really hard. We worked hard in therapy. We worked hard at our relationship. We prioritized family. But I'll tell you, this stage in life is the funnest yet, because we really don't do a lot we don't want to do. And that's a blast.
See, this is why I'm so eager to talk to people in your age group, because I think we just don't get enough of hearing how wonderful this part of life can be. Because it sounds to me like you figured a lot out.
Well, or we were just divine intervention helped us survive. I'm not sure. But I I am sure that neither one of us have stopped working on our relationship. I mean, we have a blast, and our top thing we want to do is be together, and that's fun. And I hate it for people that aren't in that situation. I highly recommend getting out if you are. It needs to be life-giving. And it's not all, I mean, this has to be a pattern, a sustained pattern of negative before you bail. You know what I'm saying?
How did you know that this was the right person for you?
I didn't. I was 24 years old. And, we did everything wrong. We got engaged fast. We lived together. We did fast and crazy and poor and all the things but we worked hard. We never stopped working.
And you got engaged fast. Was that because you were so in love? How did you decide to do that?
No, we did. I don't call that. Looking back, our brains were dopamine saturated. And I mean, you don't know anybody until you're married to them for 15 years, and then you got to get to know them all over again, So I don't know about the love at first sight stuff, but I would say that happened to us.
There's something to that, right? It's mysterious, but
yeah. There's energy fields, but also you have to really watch. I mean, David's not a love bombing charmer, but if you're dating somebody that is, and you think it's love at first sight, you need to run like hell because that's a narcissist,
Do you hear any dating advice in the field these days that you're like, no, not that?
I don't know. I don't even know what the latest, greatest dating advice is. I would say tried and true is doing exactly the opposite of what David and I did, which is take it slow. Don't flood your brain with dopamine. Really figure out who this person is. So the last thing you do is have sex with them right away, because anybody that has sex right away is going to try to make a relationship work. And that you jump over all the steps. So that has nothing to do with a moral code, although if you have that, great. I'm just saying, don't skip the steps. Do it in order.
From a brain standpoint, a neuro
standpoint. From a brain-based standpoint. Absolutely. And just to know somebody, you don't know them. If they're asking you deep, dark questions, or you're telling them about, the worst thing that's happened to you in your life on the first call or first date or first 10 dates, you need to run. Slow it down. And P.S., if the toothpaste is out of the tube by sleeping with them on the first date, all bets are off. Yeah. You just might happen to end up being married to him for 35 years like I did. I mean, it was a huge gift.
Okay, so in this time too, I feel like we have a bit of some commitment phobic people walking around. There's a lot of, with the apps and stuff, I think a sense of you can always find somebody else. But then to what degree do you recommend people stick through things?
Well, it depends on what you're sticking through. I mean, and what you're always going to look for is incidents versus patterns. So if you've got somebody that has a pattern of putting you in a one down position, or a pattern of being, ghosting you and then showing up later, or a pattern of somebody that is disrespectful in the relationship, that kind of stuff, then you got to be out of those. People tend not to ever get to therapy and change. And so you're getting the best while you're dating. Now, that's not to say people that aren't motivated and lovely don't grow through the relationship, because they do. But you want to date long enough and get through some stuff long enough to see the bubble burst, the dopamine bubble go away, and see what you've really got going, But if it's incidences, or if nobody's perfect, and we want to be careful on that, because if things are not exactly perfect and you bolt quick because you're afraid of a commitment with imperfection, then that's problematic too. Do
you think everyone should go to couples therapy?
That's a great question. I think anybody could benefit. But I think it's also, I don't want somebody sitting on my couch and say, I'm coming to therapy, but I don't have anything to work on. That's boring as hell. So I don't think it's a check the box kind of idea. I think you got to know what you need to work on or what your differences are, or whatever. Then yes, you can benefit. But
And you
don't
have
go
to
to check a
want to go,
box.
I guess, right? You have to want to.
Oh, nothing's going to change.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so to wrap us up, KK, are there any last thoughts you want to share or just closing up about where we can find you?
Tennesse, I don't really have any thoughts. I think I've told you every bit of smidgen of thoughts I have, but I love to pontificate, but I think I don't have anything glaring to say, but we would love to talk to anybody that we have a website, TNNFB, Tennesse Neurofeedback, TNNFB.com. And you can contact us through that and we will call you back.
Perfect. And can people have a kind of question answer? Like they can call and you
Yeah,
guys.
if you have interest, just do the contact form and we will reach out to you and set up a time to talk you through whatever questions you have and interests you have.
Perfect. And you can set people up with talk therapists also.
Yeah, if people want to come for an intensive, we will do that. We will not make a referral unless you are a neurofeedback client. So it wouldn't be something that if you're in Nashville and just say who's the best therapist here, we're not gonna do that because we don't know you. If that
Mhm.
makes sense.
That makes sense. You wouldn't know exactly who to refer to.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds great. We're going to put all of that in the show notes so that people can easily click to the links and everything. And
Awesome.
you'll have to come back, KK.
I will come back anytime you ask. And you did a phenomenal job interviewing. Everybody's going to want to subscribe to your podcast.
You're so sweet. Let's manifest that.
Let's do. We can, for sure.
We
For
definitely
sure.
can. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to Venus and Gemini. If this episode resonated, it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe or leave a review or share it with someone you love. Until then, see you guys next time.